All right, Boker Tov, good morning.
Where did you find it?
I want to fill you in on what we did last week. Last week we started off with a provocative question. And the point of the provocative question was to bring up a provocative conversation about matters between husbands and wives, relationships. And the question we started off with last week was, if part of honoring the Torah scholar is calling them by their respective title, such as rabbi, should my wife address me as rabbi?
No.
And then we asked further, so forget me. We mentioned a great rabbi. Someone mentioned Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky last week. Should Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky's wife call him Rabbi Chaim or Rabbi Kanievsky, or should she just call him Chaim?
Thank you.
We had a very interesting conversation about this, and hands down we all agreed that a wife to her husband are equals, and they call each other by their first names.
Correct.
And I read to a source last week from the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish who writes that whereas in some relationships distance and respect are considered honorable, you honor somebody by giving them a certain title, a certain respect, in between two people who are supposed to be close, distance and respect are harmful and very hurtful.
Well, respect, not, but distance.
Respect in the form of distance, very good. Meaning, when you would call somebody by their, if your husband was a doctor, Dr. Goldberg, is your husband, what do you come Dr. Goldberg for? And we mentioned that this is a very important point. And part of the discussion that we had last week was there are many people who give advice on marriage and relationships and all kinds of things that are unfortunately influenced by very, even if they're coming from a Jewish place, very incorrect places, very incorrect sources, very unhealthy understandings of what are relationships. And we mentioned about a young woman who committed suicide in Israel because all she wanted was to hear her husband call her by her first name. And in their circles, they don't call each other by their first name. And husband, wife.
What?
Last week, the video is already on YouTube, so you can check out the video on YouTube.
We're strange people.
And we mentioned it's a percentage of people that do such a thing. But then we discussed some more about relationships, and I told you that I was in the middle of started writing a book. And so I'll tell you, there have been places and times where I've sat in lectures, and I'm only married 3 years. I won't lie to you. I have not been married for 50 years. I don't have the experience
We know how long you've been married.
If you have, it hasn't been to me, and I'd like to know about it.
But I unfortunately have sat in many places and in many classes and in many situations, and there's a famous book, and I'm sure that 50% of you have read this book.
Sorry.
On relationships, written by a rabbi. Everyone likes to read his books. If you would ask me, you should take this book, and you can't throw it away because it's a Torah book, but you should put it in the Geniza, in the Shemos, put it in a place where nobody's going to read it.
You mean Shmuley B'Dea?
No.
Manis Friedman?
No.
We're on a video camera, but not Rabbi Shmuel B'Dea, not Rabbi Manis Friedman,
I know.
and even if you tell me the name, I won't tell you.
Oh, well then how can we know? Did we read the book or not?
I can know if you read the book or not. This rabbi says that everything a wife does to her husband, it's from Hashem, and everything a husband does to his wife, it's from Hashem, and they shouldn't fight about anything because everything is from Hashem, and they should just accept whatever the other one does to the other one. So if she's going to come now and hit him on the head with a baseball bat, it's from Hashem, Baruch Hashem, there are things that are not, I'm sorry, it's not okay to be in a relationship and to be abusive. It's not okay, and abuse doesn't only come in the form of physical abuse. It's a
mental.
Abuse can be verbal, it can be mental, it can be emotional, it
Yes.
can be financial. There are all kinds of abuses that show up in relationships, and it cannot be that someone will tell me that my God says, just tough it out, it's all from me.
No.
What nonsensical idea is that? And the rabbi who wrote this book is giving advice to people that is very dangerous for them. There are people that can be hurt, and here, physically hurt. And they'll say, the rabbi told me I should accept it from God. How could something be from Hashem if it comes from some crooked, corrupt individual? How could it be? And what I've noticed throughout the years is that the people who are teaching these topics have zero to little understanding about what Hashem wants from us inside of relationships. And the reason I tell you this is my first smicha, my first rabbinic ordination, was on doing weddings. And most of what I studied by Rav Peretz was not about actually doing the wedding, but about how to be in a relationship, how to be a couple, how to teach. That's my job, to teach a couple when they come to get married, more than they need to know. So what words do you mumble when they give the ring to the other one? How do you write your name in the ketubah? More than that, they have to know how to live with each other.
Can't you just send them over to the rabbis?
Now I can say
Now we can.
she waited a few years to get her license.
That again.
Focus on something else.
And so Rav Peretz put out an
You
essay.
do more mitzvahs.
He's much cheaper.
Rav Peretz put out an essay that's called Shalom V'Achva, love and joy, peace, tranquility. And Rav Peretz lays down the ground rules for what is a healthy relationship according to the Torah. And this doesn't only apply to married couples. You can extrapolate ideas from this to normal relationships between friends, between siblings, between children and their parents, between in-laws and their... all kinds of situations you can learn out from there. And so I started writing this book. And I started translating word for word, writing my own commentaries. And then, it hit me that it doesn't... You can argue with me. It's not coming from a place of humility, it's coming from a place of truth. I shouldn't write this book alone. Because my collective experience in marriage is 3 years, add in a few other years before that I married people off, but not much experience. And I think that collectively around this table we probably have a few hundred years of experience in relationships and marriage and in all kinds of interpersonal relationships. We've learned about some of these topics already before. And I figured what's a better way than to actually write a commentary on such a book if we just do it together. We'll all share, we'll all contribute. The same conversations that we always have, the same questions that we always ask, they'll be filmed. If one of you or a few of you want to take it upon yourself to write down some of the notes, to maybe, I know one person wants to try transcribing the videos, but if she had some help, I want to put this book out together. When we finish learning this, however long it will take us, months, weeks, years, who knows how long it will take us. But together we'll be able to publish a Monday morning book about our collective understanding of what it means to be in a relationship, to be in any relationship, but specifically this one, which we'll talk about, is marriage between a man and a woman, a husband and a wife. So before that, I want to backtrack to... Yes?
I just want to make a point about the fact that you said that the Rebbe said everything is from Hashem. If everything is from Hashem, then how can we have a free choice? Yeah, the free choice to make a decision to make that relationship better. And it's based on our tzira, our choice, free choice, that we can make a great relationship, no matter who the relationship is.
Absolutely. It's an easy thing to do, to blame everything on Hashem. We do it a lot. I'm sorry to share a story that's not so fair. There was a man, a rabbi, perhaps even a famous rabbi in Jerusalem, who was killed in a car accident. He was driving some 30 to 40 miles over the speed limit. He crashed into something and he died. And our parents refused to come to his funeral. He wouldn't go. They came to ask him to come, and he wouldn't go. He said, why not? He said, I know what's going to happen there. All the rabbis are going to get up, and the siblings are going to get up, and the co-workers are they're all going to eulogize. Oh, Hashem, why did you take him away from us? Oh, Hashem. So the man was driving 40 miles over the speed limit. Everything bad in the world, I blame on Hashem. Everything that you do wrong, you're going to throw on God afterwards. He said, what kind of world do we live in? No, it's harsh. It's harsh. I accept that it's harsh.
Was that one of his students?
Not a student.
Or a friend of his?
Maybe, I don't know if it was a friend, a colleague, acquaintance.
But I understand that because
I don't
he
know.
caused his
That's
own.
hard.
He
Yeah,
caused
but
it
that-
himself.
But that's kind of harsh to not go to someone's funeral.
Of course it's harsh. I understand that it's harsh.
Yeah.
And perhaps he knew that they would ask him to speak, and he would have nothing kind to say, and therefore he just abstained from doing such a thing. I have to remind you, when I speak about our parents is perhaps one of the kindest, this is our parents,
Okay.
one of the kindest, warmest, sweetest people that I know. And ever since I've been married, the attitude has switched more from a rabbi to a student to like a real, like a grandfather. He'll invite me over. I sit on his couch at his house. He'll serve us food together. Like interesting things that on the side of him that I never experienced as a single student in Yerushalayim. Along with that kindness comes a very accurate and strict sense of what is truthful and what is not. And you will never find our parents complimenting people, flattering people for no good reason. He's not a politician. And when Rabbi was supposed to be a candidate for chief rabbi of Israel. He backed down and said that he can't lie all the time. He can't always pretend that everything, it just doesn't work for him. Some people do. He's not able to do such a thing. And what we learned from our parents is, so that personality doesn't work for everybody. Some people struggle very much with their personality. But we knew that the things that he told us or that he taught us were absolutely truthful in his eyes. That he wasn't telling us things that were, that's what you're supposed to say, that's what they do on the street, that's what the Orthodox community said. He didn't care where it came from. If it was true, he shared it with you. And if it wasn't true, he felt that it was a problem. And this translates back into the things that we'll be learning here. When this group of Jews that I mentioned last week, which is a minuscule percentage of the Jewish community, but they have all kinds of crazy takanot, all kinds of rules in their sect, how husbands and wives should be married but not really be married. I'll repeat some of them. Don't get up in arms at me, I don't agree with them. Not walking on the same side of the street with each other, ever. Not sitting down to eat together at the same table, ever. Not sleeping in the same beds with each other.
Ever?
Almost ever.
Well, they do have children, so.
They're
occasionally,
only allowed to intimately be with each other twice a month with their rabbi's approval beforehand.
Who is this? What sect is it?
I'm gonna repeat. It's
Yes, but what's the name of the sect?
No, he
a
doesn't want to
minuscule
say.
group of Hasidim that I don't feel the need
I
to
think I
embarrass
saw a
them.
movie about this a couple of Jewish film festivals
Could be.
ago.
It could be. And where our rabbis saw holiness and purity and goodness and closeness and intimacy, these people see sin and lust and seduction and all kinds of things like that. And it has caused them to think that they're holding on to angels. They think they're living this holy life. But like I mentioned to you last week, parents told me that the majority of couples that he deals with, infidelity, cheating on each other, they came from this sect. Because if a person she can't have her husband can't have his wife, so they're going to look for what human beings look for somewhere else.
Okay, so
And
these
there's
are
a
the people
reason-
that go to Tel Baruch.
There's a
Okay.
reason
I'm just
why
checking
our
out.
rabbis had a different understanding of a relationship between a husband and a wife is Kodesh Kodeshim. It's the holiest of holies. It's supposed to be that way. In fact, the tradition, especially in Europe, which is where the sect comes from, the tradition in Europe was that a rabbi was never allowed to be ordained until he was married. Because until he's married, he's not worth anything. It's like that in many Ashkenazi communities you go to until today. They don't wear a talit, they don't get an aliyah to the Torah, don't do Birkat Kohanim, they don't lead services. Now, I think that's a harsh judgment on people who are single, my personal opinion. But it wasn't born out of being European. That's what I'm trying to share. It's not an Ashkenazi thing. It happens to be one tiny group of Hasidim that their Rebbe, perhaps he was a very holy and abstinent person, but to translate that on his entire sect of followers is a destructive and damaging force that the rest of the rabbis and the Jewish people have never agreed with and have always argued about, and it's a problem. It's a problem.
How big is the sect grow?
Numbers?
It's very large.
It's a very
It's very
large
large.
sect, but it's not a majority of the Orthodox Jewish community.
Hold on, so are they causing problems within Israel today?
They don't impose this on anybody outside of their walls of their community. But inside of their community, and where we started, the most problematic, the point where we started, was not being able to call your spouse by their first name. Absurd. It's an absurd thing. It's meant to keep a certain distance, but what kind of relationship requires distance inside of it? More than Hashem already put inside of a relationship.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, for example, this book, as we're talking about relationships and all this stuff, its intention would be to reach people in these fringe communities, perhaps, or maybe not so fringe, where their perceptions of how to have a relationship might be limited, to give them collected
They would not
aphorisms and
read this
wisdoms
book.
verified by the rabbinate and the rabbi. Is it for that purpose? To give them like an alternative?
It's a good question. Who are we talking to?
Who are we talking
Who's our
to?
target audience?
Our
Is that
parents
your
wrote
target
this.
audience?
Our parents originally wrote this essay.
This could be forbidden fruit for them to hide under
But
the mattress.
They will not.
Ooh.
They will not read this.
Maybe Japanese lover!
This is their equivalent. Call your
Our
husband
parents
by his
originally
real
wrote
name.
this book
Forbidden.
for his students who are getting married. He wrote the essay for us. It's not a book, it's an essay that we'll expound on. He then added and subtracted from the essay for his students who became rabbis and communities to have something to learn with the couples that they married. And so it's meant for a larger audience with a specific focus, but I wouldn't say that we're writing it for these guys because, like Tamar said, they probably won't read the book. Rather, we have to know that outside of this world, we live in a world, like I mentioned last week, people look up to Hollywood stars, to actors, actresses, musicians, sports players, a world where somebody sent me a quote that said that a relationship in Hollywood is considered successful if it lasts longer than the milk in your refrigerator does. We live in a scary world, in another place, in a different society, it's a scary place. The relationships that you see on the street today are not relationships. Relationships are falling apart. 87% of couples in this country live what they call emotionally divorced lives. They live together, but they don't have anything to do with each other. They'll show up to events together, they'll, go to the co-workers' birthday parties together, but they do their own thing entirely, have nothing to do with it. Roommates under the same roof.
That's very sad.
Of course it is.
Of course it's sad.
I just can't believe that people could accept a life like that.
For some, maybe they don't know any better, or that's just resign themselves to what it is that they
The
think a
alternative
relationship
is
is.
divorce, right? Either they get divorced, which is like 50%,
Which they can't afford.
right?
But
The problem
But-
with divorce,
Yeah.
it's just too expensive to live
That's
separate.
right.
That's
Exactly.
exactly what a
To
friend of
live
mine just
together
said.
and
So,
separate.
right,
Do
right.
you know that if
So
there's a
some people
couple-
prefer
Sure.
having a husband or a wife to show up to an event. So they get divorced internally without actually
But this
going
is
through.
such an unhealthy state of affairs. If this is true, this is such an unhealthy state of affairs.
people
Sure,
can't
it's very
afford to
sad,
get
but I
divorced.
have lots of people like that.
I know people who can't
very
afford to
sad.
get divorced and live in the same house, but have nothing to do with each other.
Right.
Never go anywhere together. So I offered
So
to
why
pay
are
for
you
the divorce
surprised?
so that they can get.
So
I mean, I think
There
it's
is nothing to
terrible.
be surprised. Unfortunately, that's reality.
And he said, no, it's financial because if I get
Yeah.
divorced, I'm going to have to give her X amount of money. I don't want to give her a penny.
Right.
See?
Sometimes you can't afford also. It's easier to live together, even you are not together, rather than share and then nobody will enjoy it.
But hold on 2 seconds. How can anyone do that and be happy within themselves with
They're
what
not
they're
happy.
doing?
Yeah,
Nobody
no,
say they have
Well,
life.
then why would you do that? I mean, isn't it the most important thing in the world for you is to
Have
be
you ever
happy?
walked down the street before and seen all the people who cannot smile?
And it's
No, have you
true.
ever seen people? You're
You're
standing
right.
at Starbucks ordering your coffee, and there
Yes.
are people that are waiting in line, and it's like, you need this coffee because it might save your life. Please take it. You know, this kind of. There are people in this world who are just they're not
Sure.
happy, and it's not their fault. But you live in a world. The amount of people, and those of you who are either in or have spouses who are in the mental health field, will tell you the amount of people that are coping with their lives that they're inside of. The world is not people are not living beautiful, dandy, fairy tale lives, and that's okay, that's fair. But half of it could be solved. Half of it could have been avoided had they known, had they been taught, had this world been given a value of what does it mean to be. I had a story when I was in Yerushalayim. Now, when I pick on the Orthodox world, you should know the reason I do it is because I hold us to a different standard. It's not fair. I'm not being fair. People have told me, you're not fair. How can we always, you know what it looks like in Governor Drive? Yeah, okay, but I have to deal with the issues that I can deal with. And whoever's in charge of Governor Drive should deal with issues that happen on Governor Drive.
Correct.
I sat at a Shabbat table in Yerushalayim. I've shared this story with you before. A young girl who I saw with her hair covered, but couldn't have been older than 24, 25. And she was without a husband, without children. Something didn't add up here. So we were talking, and someone asked her, what's your story? Where are you from? She said her name, and she was married for exactly 1 week.
I know somebody
1
like
week.
this too.
She came home the night of her wedding, and her husband, who they told her is going to be the next Rosh Hashiva, the next great rabbi, they should hear the things they said about him, by the way. Part of why Peretz is, when people call him the best shidduchim, he says, I'm not sure you want to talk to me. Because I'm truthful, and I won't tell you he's going to be the next Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, because he's not. I'm going to tell you who he really is. If you can't handle it, don't call me. They inflate, and then you think She married this boy. He came home and he started beating her on the night of her wedding.
Right.
He was drunk. Came home drunk from the wedding. Came home every night of the Yeshiva Brachot drunk. There's a reason why in my house I don't serve alcohol ever, aside from wine. Never. I'm sorry if you like, so drink somewhere else. I've seen too many people hurt from alcohol abuse that I'm just not interested in being part of it. Every single night of Shaar. And at the 7th day of Shaar, she asked him, tell me, why is it that what did I do to you? He said, you're just a blank piece of paper that I could write on, do whatever I want with for the rest of my life. She called her brother, uncle, I don't know. Someone came, took her to Beit Din. They got divorced after the Shaar.
Thank God.
Baruch Hashem.
Right.
Baruch Hashem.
Otherwise, he will do it all the time.
But
Absolutely.
Do you think something like that happens because the dating process is so short?
no, could be. That's a factor of it. I mean, other people might be able to tell science and know, but the amount of people that have dated for years and then are still in an abusive relationship shows that dating for years doesn't necessarily help.
No.
What does tell me that in yeshivot we spend so much time studying the laws of Shabbat and what happens if a cow jumps over a fence and breaks somebody's car and who pays double and who pays triple, and nobody they talk about cows and nobody tells you, hey, you're gonna get married. What about your wife?
Yes.
What about raising children? What about in my yeshiva? Yeah, much of it's drilled into our brains about marriage, about raising children, about things that we're single, we're 18-year-old. What do you want talking to us about marriage for? But he said, if I don't teach you about these things, who's going to teach you about it?
Correct.
Who's going to tell you?
Correct.
But
Yeah.
don't the rabbis get it when they teach?
I don't.
Those are the rabbis. Those are the
So I want to tell you,
teachers.
I don't blame them, and I'll tell you why I don't blame them. The world that we live in has been influenced so much by the religions around us that we've adopted certain philosophies that are not ours. I'll tell you who I learned this from. My first rabbi to ever tell me that was in 6th grade. That was Rabbi Hollander. For the good. I'm telling you about him for the good. I only have good things to say about Rabbi Hollander. And Rabbi Hollander told me in that 6th grade, you don't understand the magnitude of what you're hearing until much later in life. That so much of our practice has been influenced by the fact that we lived in such close proximity to Christians throughout our exile. That we've already come to this point where it's not tzniut, it's not sanua to talk about marriage too much. It's not modest to speak too much about relationships. You shouldn't talk to single boys and girls about relationships and marriage and children. It's not proper to speak about it. And even when they are married, you shouldn't do it publicly, and it shouldn't be with... And there is truth to this concept of modesty, but it cannot come at the expense of crippling a society from having healthy relationships. It can't. It just cannot.
I have to say that Roman Catholics, and only because I have a Roman Catholic that works for me, others who know these things, who is getting married, they have had to go for 18 months of counseling before this priest would marry them.
From the priest who's not married.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I just want to make
And
sure.
that's,
Okay.
that's what I was saying.
The man who's not married and gives advice on how to be in a relationship.
That's right.
That this though happens in the Orthodox world too. When we get married, we also have chatan and kala classes and you speak. But you have to imagine the longest amount of time you're engaged for is 3 months, and the amount of learning you get in 3 months under duress of what color the flowers need to be and the tablecloth. It should be straight or it should be pleats on the sides. How much do people ask? And what can you teach a person in 3 months? That they're now 19, 20, 21, 24, 25. If they don't know until today.
There's a lot of halacha they teach them.
But there's supposed to be also role model, your family, your parents, your
That's right.
all the time from 0 till 18 or 20.
What happened
No?
to people though whose parents have also their own crazy relationships?
אז חבל.
And I can't learn from them.
So there's the teacher.
There are those who learn from home and those who don't have a home to learn from.
That is
Most
correct.
people come from dysfunctional families.
I think everybody's family is dysfunctional if you look at it in a certain lens. That's my conclusion in the world. Everybody comes from a dysfunctional family. We're all just function to different levels. That's it's like the rabbi said, everybody walks to shul. Some walk from their house and some walk from their car, but everybody walks to shul. That's how we're all dysfunctional. But it's true, we don't all have and I mentioned, I don't want to repeat too much of last week, but Harav Peretz told us that, the famous song they would sing in Bavel, and I'll remind you, those of you who were here last week. In Babylon, there was a song they would sing to the groom at his wedding. Matzah Motzeh, Matzah Motzeh. They would say, it's a hint to two verses in the Torah. One verse says, Matzah Isha, Matzah Tov. I found a wife, I found a woman, I found goodness. Meaning, they're asking him, did you find a good wife? Are you happy? The second verse said, Motzeh. Motzeh ani ta'isha mar mimavet. I'm finding this woman to be more bitter than death itself. And the rabbis are saying, no, did you marry a woman who's happy? Or is she more bitter than death? The guy's married 45 minutes he's married. An hour he's married. Are you asking him what kind of woman is he? He doesn't know. And Peretz explains that the tense here is different. Matzah is in past tense, while motzeh is in present tense. Did you find a wife? Is this who you've decided you're married? If this is your decision, that you're done, this is the most beautiful, this is the most intelligent, this is the most attractive, this is the smartest, this is the most talented, this is the only one that I ever want to know, Matzah Isha, Matzah Tov. You found a wife, you found good. Motzeh, but if you're constantly searching, I'll marry this one for now until the next one comes along. Until I find someone more pretty, until I find someone more intelligent, find one with a better college degree, who with richer in-laws, whatever you're looking for. And how many people do that while they're married, they're still searching?
Oh my God.
What do you mean, oy vey voy?
Oy vey voy, exactly what I'm saying.
People do this all the time.
I'm
And they don't
years,
verbalize
I
it.
You're
kind of
talking
things.
about a generation a little closer to your age. We're all coming from two generations ahead of you. Oh,
Back,
back.
not ahead, back.
No,
And
back is
that's it.
ahead.
Well, whatever. It's like you have to plus that first in your moments. Remember, collectively we're good, So it's like the way we see the world and how dating and relationships and the way it worked in our households,
That's
in
right.
our world, was really very, very different.
To what
So,
it
for
is
example,
today.
you even see it as a teacher or, those of you that had children and raised children, and now you look at what the younger generation is allowing in their kids as they raise them. And, you said you'd never do it, but rolling your eyes a little bit. I know, because that's what I hear people report tonight. Everyone wants to be polite and not say anything about how the grandchildren are being raised, but it's different. And so the group in your target market are people who are 40 years younger than us?
More.
Really? So, I'm not certain the Monday
Not everyone.
I'm not certain the Monday group's way of, happy Shalom bias in the house.
No, I have to argue with you, Paulette.
Or maybe it is.
It's because you've been there. You've done that. You're 40 years ahead of the game, 50, whatever you want. There's something about, history doesn't lie. Things that today come up and it's pop psychology and it's like this is the best on the market and the best parenting, but we don't know if that's true or not. You give it time and things either fail miserably or run really, really well. And I think that's why the people around this table have the greatest advantage. You've been in relationships. You've been in relationships that have worked, that haven't worked, that you see the lens of life from a much broader perspective than somebody who's dating today. Somebody who's 19 and the only thing that they can see is, like my husband said, the plates on the table and the flowers. And I think that's timeless. That's something that's timeless.
Can I read something to you? Harav Peretz has a manual for rabbis. This is what we're learning from.
I believe so.
He wrote this book to give us a manual to be rabbis. And when you go out there to the field, there are some things we didn't learn when we were in yeshiva, or we did learn, and he wanted to write them down for us. The first paragraph in Harav Peretz's book starts off with these words: Dor dor v'dor shav. Every generation and its own specific needs. Ma'alotav, every generation has its own positive traits. Utzrachav haruchaniyim hamiyuchadim lo, and spiritual needs that are specific to that generation. Omnam doreinu dor muflahu, says Harav Peretz, our generation is a wondrous generation, something very special. Mishuneh umuvdal mikol hadorot. It's different, it's unique, it's separated from any of the other generations that were in this world. B'moraot hanoraim shekaru bo, from the terrible calamities, the bad things that have happened here. We live on a generation that's piggybacking on a Holocaust, piggybacking on some pretty terrible things that we've been through as a people. ובהתפתחות הרבה בטכניקה, כלים ומכשירים רבים ומגוונים. We also live in a very technologically advanced generation. Things that are different today than we ever had before. ומשום כך האדם בדורנו עסוק, רץ, דחוק ולחוץ. The person today is so pressured and stressed and worn out. להספיק ולהשיג את הצרכים הרבים. He needs all these new things that people before us didn't need. מכשירים וחפצים חדשים. All kinds of new devices and toys and things that you didn't need before. Once upon a time, people were content with making coffee in a pot. Then they got coffee makers. Then they have these little Keurig cups that if you don't have one of those machines, all of a sudden people feel, if I'm the nebuch who still takes the spoon out and puts the coffee in the cup, it's like, I'm a poor person. I don't have the fancy machine they have. Even the synagogue has one. People live in a world where the needs are very different than before. It's true that once upon a time people used to just have a bed and a pillow and a table and they have whatever food came. Today it's a whole different world. People need things that maybe you'll think are not necessary, but they really need them because the world which they live in requires from them to need these things. So some of these needs were forced upon us based on the winds that are blowing in this generation. You find today people don't have this calm, this tranquility, this I'm content with what I have. And all of this influences negatively on their relationship with Hashem, their creator. You don't have the peace of mind anymore to just think, to breathe. It's a funny thing today. How many young people are running out to try meditation, to do yoga, they're trying to find this peace in a world which is full of chaos. And if not full of chaos, full of, my wife will tell me I'm guilty, so I'll keep being guilty. You live in a world where you can't get away from 5 seconds from something beeping at you, or buzzing at you, or calling at you, or ringing at you. And if it's not your phone, then it's your car that does it to you. People today have refrigerators that beep at them and buzz at them and send them messages. People walk around with watches that get their emails and they get their... You never have a moment in your life where you're free, you're just you. You
have to go camping.
You have to go camping.
And not take any of those gadgets.
Where there's no cell phone.
And says our parents, based on everything I just told you, Al Harav, it's the rabbi's responsibility. L'achkim, to be a little bit wiser. Ulhamik etzan, to find the proper advice. Ulchapes darchim lekarev tzon marito, ulahalotam betorah virat Hashem u'midot avot, lefi ruach klal hador u'ntiotav. Because the rabbi has to know how to connect people, how to make people feel a more spiritual life, how to make people feel more close to Hashem, not by removing them from the world in which they live. Some people think that's the best way to do it. Let's divorce them from the reality, take them put them in a little bubble where none of these things exist, but to find the way inside of all this chaos, to have them have a meaningful relationship with Hashem, with themselves, with their spirituality. Both of you are saying something truthful. You're saying things have changed. We're not talking to the same generation. It's a new generation out here. Maybe even 2 new generations out here. And you're also saying the truth. The truth is, yes, this is a new generation. But as our rabbis tell us, as Shlomo Melech says, En chadash tachat Hashem, there's nothing new under the sun. We all struggle. The struggles that we struggle with are time immemorial. We've been struggling with them. They just take on different appearances and different faces and different... There's wisdom of the past that could be applied properly till today.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do.
In this book, we can do what we do, but it's your millennial voice that has to take it all and speak it to your millennial generation.
That's
kind of what I was saying.
All right.
So you
old English won't sell. That's true.
And that's true.
Let's write Shakespeare.
So let me start with you. I want to start learning. I'm going to hand these out. These are in Hebrew. If you don't want one, you don't have to. And I'm going to read the translate anyways. Just take the top 2 papers if you want and hand the rest of them. The top 2, it's 2.
Take it.
Sorry. I have a question.
I excuse myself for asking, but the book that we're going to read, to write, is about marital relationships. How is this different from all the other books? hundreds of books written about it. And what is our target audience? Are we targeting just the Jewish community, the religious Jewish community? How is this going to be different? How is this going to add something to the volume of books that are around?
What?
This is all based on Torah and our rabbis' teachings, so it obviously will fit for a certain people who want something from a certain lens. How is it different than everything else that was written? I believe that, especially where it's coming from and who we're learning it with, it will come out much more sane and balanced, and the last would be realistic.
Yes.
That's the word, realistic.
Realistic.
People are pushed sometimes into thinking that, to be in marriage you have to be Superman and it has to be this and that. Life has to be realistic, and you have to know what to expect, and you have to know what the challenges are before you get yourself into them, and to know that once you're in them, that there are ways out of them, and like everything else in the world, the style of Judaism that we've always tried to espouse at this table is one that is practical. And now we're not trying to force anyone to be living up on a cloud and a ladder. It's not what we believe Judaism looks like. Something much more practical.
I have a question.
So we're focusing mostly on a Jewish audience with a practical Torah perspective rather than just psychology or science or something.
Well, we're going to incorporate all of our experiences, but yes, from a Torah perspective, and I believe that these teachings have value on a universal level. People will be able to take from them on a universal level, but our flame, our fire that's burning right now is the fact that in the religious community, or even in the Jewish inclined community, we don't think that it has the wisdom to really help us in our relationships. And I'm trying to change that experience, that understanding.
And what are the sources that we're using?
We're using Harav Peretz's essay on marriage, but he has there a collection of many sources, which we'll quote as we go through. It's a good question. Ever?
My question is not about the book. My question is, this person who was married for a week, and I know somebody as well who this happened to, why do they make them wear a shaitel? Why do they have to wear a shaitel after they've already got divorced and they were only married for a week? Or 2 weeks, or whatever.
But usually divorced don't have to, נכון? לפי ההלכה.
In halakha, once a person is married, halakha is that even single people cover their hair. That's the halakha. The Jewish people did not accept that halakha, aside from in Arabic countries where single girls did cover their hair. But aside from that, in today's world, I don't think there's anywhere where single girls cover their hair in the Jewish community.
It could happen again.
It could happen again. I'm sure everything can happen again. But once a person is married, according to Shulchan Aruch, their hair went into the status of hair that still needs to remain covered. Though Rav Moshe Feinstein argues in the Igrat Moshe that if it will impede a person from getting married again, or it will stop a person from getting a job, or other things, a Beit Din has the right to give a leniency and say this person doesn't have to cover their hair. So you'll find people that do cover their hair, people who don't cover their hair, and it all based on their relationship with their rabbi and what their rabbi suggested that they should do when they went through that process.
Curious, because maybe because she was beaten every day and that they probably didn't even have sex. So therefore, why? Do you understand what I'm saying? There was no
She's
connection.
not supposed to be married, that's what you mean.
Yes.
So the Beit Din will deal with such an issue. If it bothered her, I'm sure this lady asked, and whatever she worked out. I've seen many people not cover their hair afterwards, based on what the Beit Din decided.
Sometimes, I might have missed it, you might have mentioned it, people ask, you don't have to cover your hair because it will make it easier to get married
Yes,
again.
I did mention
exactly what I was
That's Rabbi
thinking.
Moshe Feinstein's opinion.
Yeah, because
But
I mean,
it's not a blanket ruling. It's something that in every case has to be assessed. There are some places you have to imagine, and you might not see this, but there are some places where if she doesn't cover her hair, she might actually not get married because people will think that she's not so religious. In that kind of community, she might actually choose to cover her hair because she wants to be taken seriously as one who always covered her hair. It all depends on the social place, where you are, what you're in. That's why this halakha was not codified, because if it was codified, it wouldn't be relevant to different places and different times. Rather, it's meant to be ruled on by the rabbis who are dealing with that case at that time. That's why I can't give a blanket
I
statement
just
either.
find that if somebody is single and they're wearing a shaitel, don't other people look at them as spoiled goods? Not me.
I wish that
Not
people
me.
would know who's wearing a shaitel and who isn't.
Yeah, nowadays you can't tell.
Oh, I don't know.
So let me read
I
through
mean,
here
the
from.
men can't tell. I mean, you know.
No, sometimes you can't. Sometimes
first-
Yes, I mean, they're really quite nice. I can't
they're
tell.
nicer than
They're
they
nicer
are.
than the actual hair.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell.
No? Oh, they're beautiful.
I can't
If
tell.
they're beautiful, they're even more.
The thing is that you should know who you're getting married to, whether they wear a shaitel or not a shaitel, right? I mean, you
Well,
want to
if
know who
everything
they
is
are
truthful,
or part.
if both sides are
I
but
agree, but the thing is, you won't get married because you wear a shaitel. Well, how well do you know who you're going to meet? That's not fair either. I mean, really, a shaitel should not prevent you from getting married because you should know. I mean, you're not damaged good if you want to meet somebody, you know.
I agree with
The
you,
man must
but
have
that's
might have
not
been
how
I
people
mentioned it. I
think.
mentioned it in one of my other
That's
classes.
not how people think.
Rabbi Shlomo Aviner has an article about the mala, the
Advantage.
advantage of marrying someone who's divorced. Advantage. He writes a long article about it. That, you know, most people, it's all you're dealing with potential. Maybe they're courageous, maybe they're brave, maybe they can get through things, maybe they can't. You don't know what you're getting into until you get into it. But someone who's been divorced, you can know for sure. They were in a relationship that didn't work out for them. They had the guts to stand up and say, it doesn't work for me. They got out of it. They stood back up on their feet. They got a job. They're dating again. They're ready to build a new life. He said, how much more do you need to know about a person to know that this is probably one of the most integral people you're going to meet in your life?
Well, that reminds me of the woman that had the
Different
anxiety who published the article.
Yes, well, that's when we
Yes,
spoke about it.
right.
It was this. Remember that? That's when we
Yes,
spoke
I
about this.
remember.
Thank you for reminding
That
me.
was a good article.
I mean, it's the same thing.
Yes.
Here she's back on her feet. She does this. She does that. She da da da, and she's considered, you know,
Damage good.
not good enough for these other people.
So I want to build our scenario for us here because I know a question that will be asked as soon as we start learning. And that is, why does everybody go to the rabbi for advice? The rabbi is not qualified to give advice on everything.
It's free.
The answer to this is yes, that's true. The rabbi is not qualified to give advice on everything. He's not. And there are dangerous moments in which people who are not qualified give advice on things they're not qualified to give advice on. And so there was a situation in my community that led to some pretty bad relationships with some people. I was not willing to get involved in a case that involved severe drug abuse. And I said, you know, people on drugs, there's all kind of tendencies towards suicide, I said, I'm not licensed for this. I can talk to the person that they need to get the help that they need to get. But more than that, I cannot do and I will not do. And what that led to was, the rabbi doesn't care about people, doesn't it? And Baruch Hashem, this person today is in a whole different world. And I would like to believe, because I didn't want to pretend like some of the other rabbis did, that they were able to help them with things that they were not able to help them with.
I think everyone's looking for the Rebbe, you know, who had omniscience, who was able to see what people should do or shouldn't do, you know, and people would.
You know what's
if
funny
got
with me that you
a chance to
mentioned
have
this?
an audience with him, you know, he would say something wise, which if you held on to and followed, would lead in the right direction, which you later
Rabbi
on.
Shneur Zalman of Liadi
Yes.
was unique as a Hasidic Rebbe because he was different than the other Hasidic groups that he was a part of. Whereas Chabad is a Hasidic group, it is not a mainstream Hasidic group.
Interesting.
Meaning, it is very unique in its service of Hashem. It did not follow many of the rules that the students of the Baal Shem Tov put forth. And developed as a very unique group of Hasidim that have 7 Rebbes that follow it's a very select path of Hasidut. And the last Lubavitcher Rebbe Alav Shalom was very into that his Hasidim should study this kind of Hasidut because this is what he felt was the correct understanding of Hasidut. And when I asked, what about all the other Hasidim? The Lubavitcher Rebbe felt that it was a different kind of Hasidut that wasn't, I don't want to mention the things that he mentioned, but part of what Chabad prides itself on is what the Alter Rebbe writes in the Tanya, which is, you don't go to rabbis for advice on things that are not in their realm of expertise. Because rabbis are not supernatural beings. And rather, you go to them for the things that they understand, and for the things that it bothered very much the Baal Tanya, that people would go to rabbis for business advice and for advice on how to travel and he said it's not within the realm of we're rabbis, we're not travel agents, we're not. Now this has changed in the world because the rest of the Hasidim did not agree with the Alter Rebbe on this. The rest of the Hasidim espoused this message of the Rebbe knows everything, the Rebbe can see to the end of the world, the Rebbe is the one who can tell your soul and what it needs, but this is uniquely not a Chabad philosophy. And interestingly enough, somehow, in the last generation, with the last Lubavitcher Rebbe, they adopted this approach that is not a Chabad approach. I'm just trying to explain. This is something that switched over to the other side. So I don't think, and I think perhaps in the Hasidic world you're right. People went to the rabbi for advice because they thought he knew everything, or he had some Kabbalistic insight into their soul, into the future, like a prophet almost. But I would say that it's not the truth for the majority of Jews why they went to discuss things with rabbis. Part of what my wife said, or I don't know if Tamar said it, that it's free.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay for this advice. The rabbi is supposed to be on call for you all the time about everything, about whatever you want, and it's free. Who pays a rabbi for their hours?
The truth is also that the rabbi knew a lot more people than anyone else did,
Okay.
right? So he might know.
It's a good referral
right.
agency.
It was a very good referral
You have to
agency.
imagine that the rabbi, especially of old, was like the mayor of the Jewish community. He knew everybody, he knew everything, and what he was not able to help you with, he was able to influence someone else to help you with.
And people listen
And
to
people
him.
listen to the rabbi.
That's the thing.
Yeah? Meaning if the rabbi would tell the lawyer, listen, this guy doesn't have funds to go to
that's
court,
the thing.
I expect you to represent them pro bono. In an old school community, that would, of
they
course,
would listen.
the rabbi said that that's my job, that's my form of tzedakah, that would happen. So you went to the rabbi because of that broad scope. Like what you were saying, he knew many people and could get many more things done than your average person could. Ariella, what did you want to say?
No, I wanted to say when I first started to be with rabbis, known rabbi, it was approached to me that I have to pick a rabbi, and I think it's something that is kind of notorious among people. It's like you have to pick a rabbi, and suddenly that rabbi become it. What I've learned is, I mean, they have a lot of knowledge. The rabbi have a lot of knowledge, but they take away from you to think for yourself. So you can. I call you, but then I'm thinking what you told me. If it's something that I want to manipulate to engage in what I need to.
So if I started with Chabad, I'm going to end with Chabad. Yeah? The last Lubavitcher Rebbe Alav Shalom gave a very famous speech in which he told his Hasidim that Hasidim are supposed to be learned Jews. And that if people will come ask him questions that are already answered in any of the 4 volumes of Jewish law, then he will not answer them. Because he expects them to look up the laws, and if it's already written down and something they should know, they shouldn't come and ask him, they should use their own judgment. Something very important. Use your own judgment, not everything you ask me about. How many times I try to ask Lapot a question, he throws me at, what am I, God? I mean, everything I'm going to tell you, everything I say is what you should do. But you're right, not everybody, and I don't want to say that it comes from a place of wanting to rule, wanting to manipulate, wanting to be in control. You almost feel like a certain responsibility. Kind of like when a child asks a parent a question, a parent is very afraid to say, I don't know. I'm not sure. It makes me, maybe I'm not going to be strong enough for my child. And so you tell the child all kinds of things. You know, the child grows up thinking chocolate milk comes from brown cows because that's what their parents told them when they were kids, because they couldn't bear to tell them that you got chocolate milk in the grocery store. That's where you get chocolate milk. Sometimes a rabbi will feel a certain responsibility for his community, and out of that desire to always want to make them happy, he'll try to talk about things and deal with things that he probably is better off not dealing with and not doing. So why am I telling you all this? Because what I believe was once the role of a communal leader, of a rabbi, giving advice, being there for people, speaking to them about their issues, in this generation, that baton has been passed on to all of you. Because there are people that come to talk to you about their problems, come to talk to you about the issues. They come to ask you for advice on things, and when you say, hey, why don't you go to the rabbi? I don't want to talk to the rabbi about my marriage. I don't want to talk to my therapist about my... people come to their friends today a lot more to talk about things than they go to other people. It's actually become almost a little bit of an epidemic that people don't talk to the right people. They're always talking to their friends. And their friends, who are not even rabbis, I mean, they're not qualified in that, they don't know when to say, listen, this is out of my jurisdiction.
You know what's interesting? Over the past 20 years, if you just turn the radio on, like years ago when I was in sales, I was always had the radio on in the car. I'd listen to Dr. Laura. She would talk about everything, am I right?
Yes.
And then there was this other guy, I can't remember his name. He was Dr. somebody, was male. and he was a therapist, and he was doing his thing. And everything,
Talk
everything,
psychology.
all the
Dr.
talk
Phil.
psychology, it was all out, you know, and KGO, the AM
Right.
stations, this is all you heard. And it's interesting, you know, I'm doing the au pair thing 16 years. And these girls come from all over the world in different countries where they don't have, you know, the talk psychology like out in the open. You know, they have come from cultures where it's not polite to talk about everything that just happened Saturday night. And or what's happening in your family, you know, let's just talk about it, you know. And it's very, very interesting. That's the world we are in, at least in America now. Everybody talks about everything.
Too much.
Everything.
And
Yes.
what about the Facebook and all the other ones?
Everything, they are
Reality shows just
talking
expose
about
everything.
everything.
So the
So
reason
that's
the
why
reason
they're
why
coming to their friends, because it's now
It's
okay. We grew up, there were a lot of things you didn't talk about, and our parents, oh my God. You know, we grew up in a world where if you had cancer, you didn't say, I had cancer. This is the big C.
The
So
mahala.
what happens here in our world is people go to their friends for help, and much of this you'll read, Pence is running to a rabbi. But it's relevant today to many of you who are dealing with people in your own right. And some of the things we'll read may seem like they're pointed at me or at my wife, but they're pointed to all of us, and it's important for you to own up to it and to share your opinions on it as well. My last
also
thing,
happen to think that they
Yes.
don't want to hear what rabbis have to say.
that could also be true. Before I read this
I
first
think that's true.
paragraph,
If they
I think it's
know,
very true.
I think
If
the
you're
last
gonna limit
reason
them, they don't want to hear
the
it.
last
Yeah.
reason why
They
people went to
have an
rabbis
idea.
more than they went to their friends, and in this generation, unfortunately, it might be the other way around. You didn't have psychologists and therapists and psychiatrists and people who this is what they dealt with for a living. And you should know that in general, I think that I have a rabbi whose wife is a therapist. Not a therapist, she's a psychologist. But when she was doing her rotations or her stage, she was interning she was an intern in a psychiatrist's office. And when she came home one day, my rabbi, not Rav Pelitz, one of the rabbis, asked her, so what do you think about the psychiatrist? I said, the only difference between the psychiatrist and his patient is that the patient has hope to get better. She said the psychiatrist is dripping with such ego that he knows how to fix everything, and it's all up into his hands, and he can decide who's going to be healthy and who won't be. She said the ungodliness of the psychiatrist was so terrifying to her that she felt that the patient had more hope than he did. Now she was being harsh and strict, and that was sharp, but I believe that there's a spiritual element that goes into this conversation where in a world where psychology and the mental health field has become very scientific and very medicational and very not so much dealing with the soul and its problems and the heart and its issues, but very much with how much can I drug you up so you won't deal with the problems in the world.
I
Oh,
want
no.
to say something else to that.
Hold on. There's only a psychiatrist is allowed to give
Yeah.
drugs.
Fair.
A psychologist and a social worker and everything else, they cannot think about
I didn't.
drugs.
My wife is a social worker. I don't hate on social
No,
workers.
but
Don't get me wrong.
there's a new trend now.
Oh, what's the new trend?
Which is that really you cannot just tell the patient. It's a combined thing. The patient will tell you what they prefer, what they like, or how they feel. It's much more. There's a name for it, but I don't know what it's called.
Is that a good thing?
Yeah,
It is
it's
a good thing.
collaborative. It's
It's
no
Collaborative. That's very nice.
Things
But let me
that
finish my
are going on,
sentence.
it's an employment.
People very often go to a rabbi to hear something that is more that they feel will touch their soul, will come from a place of Hashem, will come from a place of Torah, and that is something that if there was, and there are, you'll find that in the Jewish world there are rabbis who are also psychologists. You have Rabbi Twerskis to their type, and such people that people look up to because they're both. They know both, and
They study both.
they complement each other very well. That's a very beautiful thing. That's something special in this generation that you didn't have.
And to be
But-
fair, it's interesting. There is a comeback now, specifically in the social work field, but also in all mental health, where they're starting to talk about religion. Because unlike years and years ago, where they wanted to divorce the two and make it much more scientific so it can be a profession, they're starting to realize that the human psyche cannot be treated without the spiritual component. And there's a big push for therapists to go, go visit the church, go visit the synagogue.
We just
talk
had
about
now.
it.
We just had
which is a
at the
huge shift
synagogue
away
last
from
week.
we never deal with religiosity because it doesn't matter.
We had
So
a few
that's-
college students come to our shul to just watch and observe because it's part of what they have to do to study their MFT training. They have to be at a religious experience. But that's not where I was going with this. When you speak to a mental health professional, one of the safest things a person feels is confidentiality. What I share here is shared in absolute confidence, and other people will not know about it. In the days of old, when there was no confidentiality agreement, when nobody had a job that they had to, you couldn't sue somebody for sharing your. You spoke to the enta, the whole town was going to know what you told them. That's just how it worked. This is the person you get the scoop on, the latest information. You tell somebody something at shul, and they're going to share it at kids. That's how the world worked. The rabbi was one of the few people who was trusted as having the integrity not to share your secrets with other people. I'm saddened to tell you that that's unfortunately not the case. That many people, many rabbis abuse their, not just rabbis, priests, imams, abuse their confidence, the trust that is placed in them by sharing things they should not share with other people. And this is, I believe, a very big reason why people used to go to rabbis. And perhaps the reason why people may not go to rabbis anymore, because the rabbi now, a lot of things the board all of a sudden knows about, the board shouldn't know about, the Rebbitzin knows things she shouldn't know about.
I just wanted to ask you, what is it? Is the Rebbitzin also excluded if you talk to the rabbi?
Very good. You know there was a big legal dispute about this recently.
I don't think that's something that you could put in legality, Jewish legality. I think that's
No, because
integrity.
I've gone to a
That's
rabbi
an integrity
and spoke.
issue.
No, but
Well,
I've
no,
gone to
this
the
is a good
rabbi and he
question.
said, and
We
he
just
said
spoke
to
about it
me,
this week.
can I tell my wife? And I said, no.
Okay,
But
so-
then when we talk
So
about
this
the
is
closeness,
this is something that we spoke about this week actually. My wife got back. She's now a social worker. I'm a rabbi. Interesting questions that come up here. I want to share with you. And what was I going to share now about Rebbitzin? A legal case that just happened up in Oregon. There was they have this community kollel, as they call it. Now I'm not speaking. I don't know these people. I don't know the story. I just know that it made the news and it has practical ramifications on my wife. And there was an ugly divorce going down in the Jewish community in Oregon, and they came to court. And the husband knew that his wife had told the rabbi something in confidence, that if he would tell, could make the case change to his side. And so they tried to subpoena the rabbi. And as is law, I guess, in this country, I don't know all the laws in this country, a clergy member is different than a psychologist in that when you share something with a man of faith, he does not have to. This is part of the government not being allowed to persecute religious minorities. This is laws that are so old in this country that from the time of this inception. The rabbi does not have to share things that were told to him as a clergy member. So what did this man do? His lawyer is very smart. His lawyer said, well, did she ever speak to the Rebbitzin? And he said, yeah, she did speak to the Rebbitzin. So let's subpoena the Rebbitzin.
Yes.
Now the Rebbitzin stands in court and says, I'm also a clergy member. And the lawyer, who was a religious Jew, says, yeah, we Orthodox clergy doesn't ordain women as clergy members. So you're not a clergy member. Where's your ordination as a clergy member? She says, I don't have ordination. So what school did you go to study clergy? I didn't go to school to study to be a Rebbitzin. Says, where does the synagogue pay your salary as a clergy member? The synagogue doesn't pay a Rebbitzin a salary, only the rabbi a salary. In which case the judge said, you're not a clergy member. You think you're a clergy member, but you're not a clergy member. And they're fighting in court. I don't know what happened. But in court, she said, I became a clergy member when the community hired my husband and agreed that I be the Rebbitzin. You don't have to be paid to be a clergy member. The community accepted me as the female spiritual leader of this community. And the judge says, prove it. Is it in a contract somewhere? Are you on the website somewhere? Are you? And this is an ugly move on behalf of that lawyer. But this is going to bring a whole new era of our confidentiality between congregants and the Rebbitzin.
Yeah.
I mean, the judge's whole argument was maybe they told it to you as a friend, not as the Rebbitzin. Maybe they told you while you were making potato kugel, not in your office. Do you have an office?
but I meant between husband and wife.
So I just started the conversation with this. Between a husband and a wife, so you should know. Things that are told to me are not shared with my wife unless, and I do this very often, can I speak to my wife about it? Some people like tomorrow will say no, and that's completely fair. Some people, you should know, come to me wanting me to, sometimes they want to speak to the both of us. Or sometimes they want me to go to her and come back because
That's
they trust her
different.
advice
That's
more.
Or they
But-
talk to her.
Or they talk to her and will
hoping
say,
that you will-
can you speak to, I'm not comfortable speaking to the rabbi, I'd rather speak to her. That's a different story. But in a situation where you trust one person with your, I can't tell, my wife doesn't expect me to tell her things. You know how many times I'm on the phone for 2 hours with somebody? And just who
Yeah, I don't even know who was on, and that's good.
I'm sorry, it's not, but that's something that you have to work very hard to do. It's not natural, it's not normal, but in the olden days, your rabbi was probably your most trusted confidant. And that's why people went there. So I want to read with you a paragraph, just so we start with the book. This is not the part on marriage. This is advice to a rabbi on how to give advice. The first paragraph says, Tafkid chashuv u'mitzvah. Giving advice is not just an important job. It's not an important aspect of the rabbi's character, but it's also a mitzvah. It's also a positive commandment to give people advice. Tafkid chashuv, it's an important job, u'mitzvah gdolah hi larav, and a great mitzvah for the rabbi, the manhig tzibur, even to any leader of a community, in any capacity. Principal of a school, the head of a daycare, a parent in a home. V'talmid chacham and Torah scholars. Liot doresh tov, to always look out for the good of people. Ozer, to help. V'tomech, and to support people. Miya'etz etzah, to give advice. U'me'oded, to motivate people. Menachem, to comfort people. Meromem nefashot, to uplift souls. Masim shalom ben adam lechavero, it's his job to put peace between a person and their friend. Uven ish leishtom, between a husband and wife. Umelamed, mechaven, umanche, he teaches, he guides, and he puts on the proper path. L'chol ish manche Kehillato, every person from his community, l'chol Yehudi sheb'Yisrael, every Jew in the Jewish people. B'midot tovot, to teach them good character traits. V'hanhagot nechonot u'mo'ilot, and proper and helpful attitudes, perspectives on life. It's the rabbi's job not just to be there when crisis happens, not just to be there when they can give advice, to be there when someone needs a hug, when someone needs to be uplifted, when someone needs to be comforted, God forbid, when they lose somebody, when something bad, when they lose their business, when something happens to them. It's his job to be there to help also. It's his job not just then when things go bad or when they need advice, but also to help guide his community on the proper path, on the proper way of relationships, on the proper approach, on how people should live their life. When I was in yeshiva, not in our yeshiva, Rav Peretz teaches in like 5 different yeshivas. And one of the yeshivot Titanim, and he didn't have a full-time gig there, which is why the students were not really his students. He was kind of a guest lecturer that would go there often. He got a phone call. There was a young man who was studying to be a rabbi in this kollel. And he was married, his wife was pregnant. And in Israel, sometimes neighbors live a little too close to each other. It's hot, the windows are open, you hear what's going on. You know, I used to tell my next door neighbor the toaster beeped, I should go get his toaster. The phone's ringing, things like that. You hear something that here you would never hear what happens next door. But if you had 5 families living in something this size, so you all of a sudden hear more. The husband came home from kollel, from arvit, from prayers, and his pregnant wife was mopping the floor. And he says, I want pizza for dinner, where's the pizza? And she said, listen, let me finish mopping the floor and I'll order pizza. No! Put down the mop, go get pizza, come. The next door neighbor called her parents. Said he had a student, his wife is in her 9th month, and he cares about pizza. So let's call this man to his office and say, last night what did you do at your house? You came home, pizza, tell me. You have to understand, our parents wouldn't approach somebody if the student wouldn't accept this discussion, he wouldn't have gone over to him. It was a student of his. And they don't understand, your wife is pregnant. Why is she mopping the floor in the first place? So what do you mean? She mops the floor. I said, yeah, not anymore, she doesn't mop the floor. Hire a cleaning lady. I don't have money to hire a cleaning lady. So you mop the floor. Get your mom to mop the floor. And she said, pizza? He says, you're telling me that after learning a whole day and then going to pray, you come home and you could scream at your wife about dinner? You want pizza, go get it up on the way home. Pick it up on the way home. Why does she have to order your food for you? He says, you want to, so cook. Put up, take bread and put some cream cheese on it, eat something. Why is everything your wife's problem? He said, you don't understand. To be a Torah scholar, you don't just have to learn books, he told her. You have to learn how to be a human being also. I said, if I don't tell you to be a human being, who's going to tell you? Who's going to teach it to you? And the parents came to our yeshiva later in the day. They said it blew his mind that he had to tell a young man who's a rabbi, or studying to be a rabbi, that he shouldn't scream at his wife who's pregnant that she needs pizza because she's mopping the dishes. It's unbelievable that people come to him at that age and nobody taught them common sense until then.
Well, now you're talking.
That's right.
Now you're talking about the whole bottom line. Common
Sense.
sense.
But they say common sense is a funny name because it's not so common.
That's
You know,
right.
if more people had common sense, this world would be in a different place.
It's also their
Where's
parents.
midot? I mean, isn't midot one of the things that they're supposed to learn? And again, back to the roots. If the kids don't learn it, the adults don't.
I want to tell you a story.
People with
Remember
common
Rabbi
sense
Rosenbaum who came
gravitate
here for the
together.
Brit? He was the Sandak in Achanan's Brit. Sandak, I don't remember. There's a rabbi from Baltimore. We flew him in here with his wife.
Yes.
I flew him in here with his wife. You should know it's expensive to fly a rabbi in for the
Yes.
Brit. And to fly his wife also, because the Brit was on Friday, I believe. And Shabbat, he said, I don't do Shabbat without my wife, so it's okay. I don't have to come. I want you to come. So then, yeah, my wife, I can't. I said, tell me, I don't expect to bring my wife. It's too much money to ask for you. I said, but I want you. I said, okay, that's already your calculation to make. So I spoke to my parents, whatever. I brought him and his wife. I learned, by the way, in that message that, yeah, there are certain things that you tell a person, I would love to do your wedding. If you want to fly me out for the night, that's okay. But if it's going to be 5 nights somewhere else, then I'm not coming without my wife. If you can't afford to bring me and my wife, that's okay. I give up the honor of doing the wedding. I learned from him already, midot, on that first level, that it's okay for a rabbi to say that I have a family. That's an okay thing to say. It doesn't have to always be that the family is thrown out the window because the rabbi has a job to do. And then he came here, and we spent the Brit together. We learned the whole night together. The Friday night, we prayed together. We had dinner together. Shabbat morning, after my class, I wanted to walk him home. And he held my hand and said, Yonatan, I would love for you to walk me home, but enough is enough. I said, what do you mean? He said, think about it. He said, I sat at your shul on the men's side. I gave a speech from the men's side. He said, I sat at the table with all of your friends and your family. He said, when am I going to walk my wife? I said, I want to walk my wife home. You can walk me some other day. And he took his wife and they went walking down Governor Drive.
That's very nice.
And, so did he give me a class on relationships? No, but the amount of time that I spent with him, I saw something else. I saw something different. I saw a man who said,
Well, it's a role model.
that's a role model. That's midot.
Humanity.
And we try to teach midot inside of a classroom, but people are not stupid. And people, they see their teachers teach them one thing and do another thing. And they see their parents tell them one thing and do another thing. And they see the world is lacking role models. How many people have a role model they really can't not look up to? It's not people's fault that they don't have role models. And I hear people, oh, how come you don't have a rabbi, you have a role model? It's not their fault. Who can you look up to in this world? Everybody you look up to, all of a sudden you find out that they do this and they do that, and I can't look up to such a person. Very few people in the world are worthy of looking up to, and that's a sad thing. There should be someone that you say, look, that's a healthy. I want to be like them.
Can I say something?
Yeah, I never stop.
So in my mindset, we all come in because there are things we need to evolve into learning.
We come into this world or to this class?
Our soul comes in
Right.
for the purpose, each one of us has different things to learn. And life works on us, and we have the opportunity to learn those things. We all came into dysfunctional families to varying degrees because those were issues we needed to work on. So the real issue is, do you want to work on them and go to higher ground? Or do you want to beat your wife? Or do you want to say, I married you so I have a piece of paper to do whatever I want with? It comes down to the deepest purpose, spiritually and soulfully, in my opinion, of why we're alive. And each person gets to choose that for themselves. And you could do that work and never show up in synagogue.
Absolutely.
Or you could show up in synagogue every single time,
never do
say
that work.
all the prayers, and never even get close to evolving in your soul.
So let me conclude with a thought, because what Paulette said is true. When did I decide to write this book? What was the straw that broke the camel's back? My brother's Sheva Brachot. My brother Ariel got married. I did his wedding. And then one of the Sheva Brachot, they have this strange custom. They went around and said, everybody please give advice to the Chatan and Kala about marriage. It's a nice thing. It's a nice conversation.
You did that for your daughter, right?
Depends who you ask to give advice. You see, I will tell you, my Monday morning group can give advice on relationships. The people in that Sheva Brachot, is what it says, our rabbis say, Siyag lechokhmah shtika.
I don't do that.
If you want to be considered wise, you should be quiet, because once you open up your mouth, we all know you're stupid. It's a problem. There's some people who shouldn't give advice. Hey, I respected you until you spoke. And so I had people give advice, and I'm not being nice to them, but they gave advice. You know, whenever you make your wife mad, go buy her flowers. Whenever you get a box of chocolates. And I'm sitting here. It's my turn. Oh, okay, what's your advice? I said, I'm going to tell you my advice. My advice, and I said this to the Sheva Brachot, my wife was my witness. I said, ignore all advice you heard tonight. I said, ignore all of it. I said, you're going to tell me that you married somebody who you dated and you decided to live the rest of your life with, and you made her upset. And the way to solve this problem is you're going to go to the gas station and buy flowers, and that should solve all the problems. Because she's a 5-year-old kid who, when you buy her chocolates, she smiles and it's all good and happy. I said, you don't understand, there's a dysfunctional element in this conversation. There's something wrong with what they're telling you. There's advice here that doesn't make sense. I think your wife would prefer if you came home and said, you know, maybe I made a mistake. I did something wrong. Let me talk about it with you. Maybe we should go for a cup of coffee somewhere, sit at the beach and discuss what it is that we did wrong. Maybe we messed up somewhere. Maybe we should go talk to somebody else. So that's marriage advice. I said, to tell me you're going to solve all your problems with a box of chocolates? With roses from the Sprouts? That's what's going to save you. I said, no wonder people are falling apart everywhere, if that's what's considered sage advice. Or someone else said, always say yes, honey. Always say yes, honey. But your wife is always right. I know you might, maybe you always think you're right. Your wife is always right. It's not true. Your wife is not always right. And if you want to be in a healthy, if you want to be in a healthy relationship, part of being in a healthy relationship is saying, sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, and let's work it out. Though when I'm right, we agree we're right. When I'm wrong, let's agree. Be an adult. That's the first step. Be able to talk about things. And that's when I decided it can't be that these people are going to keep giving advice at Sheva Brachot. So you have to change the tide. We're going to turn it back. So
now, there's nothing wrong with bringing home flowers.
Okay, you could bring chocolates and flowers and all kinds of things.
And dark chocolate, they say,
yeah, I like chocolate.
Blood pressure.
We'll continue next week. This class
away from some people.
This class will go online. Marlene, are you going to write things up? What are we doing with this class? Notes. Is there somebody who would want to help us transcribe these classes? Anybody have time to do that?
I could do it.
Yeah?
I could try.
You try. Maybe the two of you.
Yes.
Yes?
Okay.
You are my expert note takers in general.
Yeah.
Even things I say that I don't know that I said, they wrote it down. Baruch Hashem. Okay, and Baruch Hashem, I hope that we'll keep doing this, we'll keep learning together, and we'll come out to a lot of beautiful pearls of wisdom that we can share with the world, God willing, at the right time. Everyone should have a wonderful day.
Anyway, the flowers are not in order.